You know that feeling when you've had enough? When you're sitting in your car after another awful meeting, gripping the steering wheel so tight your knuckles go white? That was me last Tuesday morning after Tony Sullivan basically told me I was too old for this business. I'm Bill Patterson, 55 years old, and I've been selling industrial equipment for 23 years. Not the glamorous stuff you see in movies. I'm talking heavy machinery, conveyor systems, equipment that keeps factories running across Ohio and Pennsylvania. It's honest work, and I'm damn good at it. My 12 major accounts generate $3.2 million annually, and I earn 8% commission on equipment plus 12% on service contracts. But let me back up and tell you how I got to that parking lot moment, because this whole mess started about a year ago when our company got bought out. Midwest Industrial Solutions had been family-owned for decades. Old man Rodriguez treated us right. Decent commission structure, solid benefits, respected your experience. Then he retired, and his son James took over. The first red flag was when James announced a strategic partnership with some private equity firm. 3 months later, they brought in Tony Sullivan as regional manager. Tony's one of those guys who thinks an MBA from Ohio State and a firm handshake can replace 2 decades of knowing your customers. He's 42, drives a leased BMW, and uses words like synergize in normal conversation. You know the type. The real problem started 8 months ago when Tony called his first restructuring meeting. He spent 90 minutes talking about optimizing our human capital and leveraging digital transformation. I've been through enough corporate BS to translate. They wanted to cut costs by getting rid of experienced guys like me. See, at 55, I'm expensive. Not just salary, though my base is $85,000 plus commissions, but health insurance for me and my wife, Patricia. She's got diabetes, and her medication runs $400 a month without coverage. Add my 23 years of vacation time, my pension contributions, and the fact that I actually use the company's dental plan, and suddenly I'm not looking so profitable on their spreadsheet. The writing was on the wall when they implemented this new CRM system. Now, I'm not against technology. I learned email, I use my smartphone just fine, I even figured out Zoom during COVID. But this system was like trying to fly a space shuttle. Tony made it clear that if you couldn't embrace our digital sales methodology, you'd be optimized out. What really got under my skin was watching Tony destroy relationships I'd spent years building. Take my customer at Automotive Parts Inc. I'd worked with their purchasing manager Dave Williams for 12 years. When they needed emergency conveyor repairs last winter, Williams called my personal cell at 6 a.m. because he trusted me to handle it. Tony saw that as inefficient. He wanted all customer contact going through the new system, with response times tracked and calls recorded for quality assurance. But Tony's real genius was in cost optimization. He'd identified inefficiencies in our equipment specifications. Translation. He figured out how to sell cheaper machines while charging the same prices. I first noticed it with the Riverside fabrication deal. I'd been working on their production line overhaul for 6 months. $850,000 worth of conveyors, sorters, and safety systems. These guys manufacture automotive components, so quality isn't negotiable. One equipment failure during their peak season could cost them millions in missed deliveries. I'd spec'd everything according to their actual needs. Heavy-duty conveyors rated for 150% of their peak capacity, redundant safety systems, industrial-grade motors designed for 24/7 operation. Standard practice. You never want equipment running at its maximum rating because that's when things break down. Tony swooped in during final negotiations and started pushing our value engineering solutions. Lighter-duty conveyors that were technically adequate for their current volume, simplified safety systems, motors rated exactly at their peak requirements with no buffer. When I tried to explain why the original specs mattered, Tony pulled me aside. "Bill, I appreciate your thorough approach, but we need to think about profit margins here. This isn't 1995 anymore. Customers want efficiency, not gold plating. The equipment Tony proposed would save the company about $240,000 in costs, while still charging Riverside the full $850,000. On paper, it looked brilliant. In reality, he was setting them up for equipment failures within 2 years, maybe less. That night, I couldn't sleep. Patricia found me at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. going through specification sheets. "What's eating at you, honey?" I told her about Riverside, about Tony's cost cutting, about the corner cutting that could lead to equipment failures. She listened quietly. She's always been my voice of reason. Then said something that stuck. "Bill, if those machines fail, real people get hurt. That purchasing manager trusted you. You can't let some MBA put workers at risk just to hit his numbers." She was right, but it went deeper than that. See, my son Michael works at Precision Manufacturing, and they'd just placed an order with us 4 months ago. Tony had handled that sale personally, and I was starting to wonder what corners he'd cut there. The next morning, I started looking closer at Tony's other deals. I had access to our shared client database, and what I found made my stomach turn. Over the past 8 months, Tony had closed 23 major contracts worth $6.8 million total. Every single one showed the same pattern. Original specifications reduced by an average of 28%, with customers paying full price for downgraded equipment. He was having our technical team reinterpret safety margins and capacity requirements to make cheaper machines look adequate on paper. The documentation was all there: original customer requirements versus final delivered specs. Email chains where Tony pressured our engineers to be more creative with interpretations. Revised technical documents that made 80% capacity look like 100% capacity through creative math. I started printing everything, staying late to access files when Tony wasn't around. What I discovered was systematic fraud dressed up as efficiency improvements. But this wasn't just about Tony anymore. 3 of his installations were already showing problems. Precision Manufacturing, where my son works, was experiencing unexpected downtime on their new assembly line. The equipment was running hot, throwing error codes, requiring daily maintenance instead of the scheduled weekly checks. When I called Michael to ask how things were going at work, trying to sound casual, his answer chilled me. "Dad, we've had some issues with the new line. Management says it's normal break-in problems, but some of the older guys think the equipment's undersized for what we're running." That's when I knew I had to act. I tried going through proper channels first, made an appointment with James Rodriguez, thinking maybe he didn't know what Tony was doing. I brought documentation, the spec sheets, the cost comparisons, the safety margin reductions. Laid it all out professionally. James listened for maybe 10 minutes before cutting me off. "Bill, I appreciate your concerns, but Tony's brought in record profits this quarter. Our parent company is very pleased with his performance metrics. Maybe you need to trust that he understands modern market dynamics." When I mentioned the safety issues, James got that corporate look, the one where they're calculating liability versus profit margins. "Are you saying our equipment doesn't meet industry standards?" "I'm saying it meets minimum standards instead of the safety buffers we used to provide. So it's compliant." "Technically, yes, but..." "Then I don't see the problem." "Bill, I know change is hard, especially for someone with your extensive experience. But we can't let nostalgia drive business decisions." There it was, the age card, played with corporate politeness. I walked out, knowing I was on my own. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Tony called me into his office and announced they were restructuring my territory to better utilize our resources. He was taking away my biggest accounts, relationships I'd built over 15 years, and giving them to younger reps who'd embrace our new methodologies. "Bill," he said, leaning back in his chair like he was doing me a favor, "you've had a good run, but this industry is changing fast. We need people who can adapt to new technologies, connect with younger decision makers. Let's be honest, most purchasing managers today are probably younger than your work experience." I kept my voice steady, but inside I was calculating numbers. At 55, with Patricia's medical needs and 7 years left until full pension benefits, getting fired wasn't just inconvenient, it was potentially catastrophic. "Tony, I outsold every rep in this office last year. My customer retention rate is 95%. My accounts generate the highest profit margins because I build long-term relationships, not quick flips." He gave me that MBA smile. "It's not just about numbers, Bill. It's about cultural fit, energy, digital fluency. The reality is, companies want sales reps who understand modern business ecosystems. Someone who can leverage social selling, optimize CRM workflows, synergize cross-platform customer touchpoints." I stared at him. Half those words didn't even mean anything. "What I'm offering," he continued, "is a transition period. 2 weeks to properly hand over your accounts. We'll even discuss an early retirement package. Might be perfect timing for you and Patricia to enjoy your golden years." Right there, he'd crossed every line. This wasn't about performance, it was pure age discrimination wrapped in corporate buzzwords. But I also realized something. Tony had just given me exactly what I needed. I understand, I said carefully. Give me those 2 weeks to transition everything properly. I want to make sure my customers are taken care of. He agreed immediately, probably thinking he'd handled a difficult conversation masterfully. Poor guy had no idea what was coming. I spent the next 2 weeks very carefully organizing my files. See, Tony had made one crucial mistake in his rush to optimize everything. He'd kept me on all client communications, even as he was modifying deals behind the scenes. I had every email, every contract revision, every technical specification he'd altered. More importantly, I had the real-world performance data. Precision Manufacturing wasn't just experiencing break-in problems. Their new assembly line was running 15% above its rated capacity during peak shifts. The motors were overheating, the conveyor belts were showing premature wear, and the safety sensors were triggering false alarms because they couldn't handle the actual operating conditions. Riverside Fabrication's equipment wasn't even installed yet, but their engineering team had run preliminary tests and identified potential bottlenecks. When I called their head of maintenance, a guy I'd worked with for 8 years, he mentioned concerns about the equipment specs matching their actual requirements. Bill, I've got to ask, some of this equipment seems lighter duty than what we discussed. Are you sure it can handle our volume during Q4 peak season? I couldn't tell him the truth directly, but I could document his concerns. Every conversation, every technical question, every expression of doubt about equipment adequacy went into my files. But the real smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Remember how Tony loved digital optimization? Well, he'd been documenting his own fraud through the CRM system. Every cost reduction, every specification change, every value engineering decision was tracked in the database to show his performance improvements. The genius of Tony's system was that it looked brilliant from a profit perspective. Equipment cost down 28% while maintaining revenue. Any MBA would see that as optimization excellence. But when you cross-reference those numbers with actual customer requirements and industry safety standards, it painted a very different picture. I started building what I called my transition documentation, officially just detailed account summaries for whoever would take over my customers. Except these summaries included everything: original customer specifications versus delivered equipment, projected failure rates based on operating conditions, potential safety violations, liability exposure calculations. I even included helpful appendices: OSHA safety requirements for industrial equipment, insurance industry standards for manufacturing operations, federal regulations for defense contractor quality assurance. Just background information to help the new reps understand their customers better. The beauty was in the presentation. This wasn't some disgruntled employee making accusations. It was comprehensive technical documentation prepared by a 23-year veteran to ensure proper customer service continuity. Professional, thorough, and absolutely devastating. But I didn't just want Tony to get a slap on the wrist. I wanted the whole system exposed because this wasn't just about one bad manager. It was about a corporate culture that valued short-term profits over worker safety and customer relationships. So I made sure my documentation would reach the right people at exactly the right time. On Friday afternoon of my last week, I submitted my final reports through the proper channels. Account transition summaries to Tony and the new reps. Technical documentation to our engineering department for ongoing customer support reference. Safety and compliance summaries to our quality assurance team because new account managers should understand regulatory requirements. And then I did something brilliant. I sent copies to our insurance carrier and legal department as part of what I called liability exposure assessment for account transition planning. Just being thorough, making sure the company understood potential risks associated with each customer relationship. The paperwork hit multiple desks simultaneously at 4:47 p.m. on Friday. By Monday morning, while Tony was probably planning his victory lap, several departments would be asking very uncomfortable questions about systematic safety violations and potential fraud. Patricia and I drove up to our cabin that weekend. Figured I deserved a few days to decompress before the fireworks started. We were sitting on the deck at Lake Erie Monday morning when my phone started buzzing. Patricia was reading her book, enjoying the quiet, when the first call came in. Jerry Martinez from Quality Assurance. Bill, I need to talk to you about these transition reports. Are you documenting systematic safety violations in Tony Sullivan's accounts? I kept my voice neutral. Jerry, I documented everything I observed during the transition process. Technical specifications, customer requirements, potential compliance issues. Just being thorough. Bill, this is serious stuff. You're saying we delivered equipment rated 20% below customer operational requirements? I'm saying the documentation speaks for itself. Check the original customer specs against what was actually delivered. 20 minutes later, Patricia Walsh from HR called. Bill, our insurance company forwarded your compliance summaries to corporate legal. They're asking questions about potential liability exposure. Can you come in this afternoon? Patricia, I'm no longer an employee. If corporate has questions about my documentation, they can reach me through my attorney. That phrase, my attorney, got everyone's attention real quick. By noon, I had 8 missed calls. James Rodriguez left a voicemail that started professional and ended desperate. Bill, we need to discuss some concerns about your account summaries. There may have been misunderstandings about standard operating procedures. Call me back immediately. I didn't call back. Instead, I poured myself a beer and watched the lake. Patricia closed her book and looked at me. How bad is it going to get? For them? Pretty bad. For us? Depends on whether they try to blame me for Tony's mess. She nodded. After 28 years of marriage, she knew when I was in full strategic mode. What happens next? Well, right about now, someone's probably explaining to James that systematic equipment underrating isn't just fraud, it's potential manslaughter if someone gets hurt. And since some of this equipment is used by defense contractors, federal regulators are going to get very interested very quickly. The calls kept coming all week. Tuesday morning brought Randy Miller from our insurance carrier. Apparently, they'd started their own investigation after reviewing my documentation. Wednesday, someone from the State Industrial Safety Board wanted to discuss compliance concerns regarding recent equipment installations. But the real earthquake hit Thursday. I was mowing the lawn when Patricia came outside looking pale. Honey, there's a federal investigator on the phone. Something about defense contractor equipment irregularities. Turns out, when you deliver substandard equipment to companies holding defense contracts, that triggers a whole different level of scrutiny. The Defense Contract Audit Agency doesn't mess around when it comes to quality control violations. The investigator, a woman named Karen Roberts, was all business. Mr. Patterson, we've received documentation suggesting systematic delivery of equipment that doesn't meet contracted specifications for defense-related manufacturing. Can you verify the accuracy of these reports? Ma'am, I documented everything I observed during my account transition. The technical specifications, the gap analysis, the compliance concerns, it's all factual. We'll need to interview you formally. Are you available tomorrow? I was available. Meanwhile, back at Midwest Industrial, Tony's world was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a tornado. Jerry Martinez later told me the whole story over beers. Monday afternoon, quality assurance started spot-checking Tony's accounts against my documentation. Every single case checked out. Equipment delivered below customer specifications, safety margins eliminated, capacity ratings fudged through creative interpretation. Tuesday, legal got involved when they realized the liability exposure. If equipment failed and workers got hurt, the company could face massive lawsuits. Worse, if federal investigators found intentional fraud in defense-related contracts, criminal charges were possible. Wednesday, the insurance company suspended coverage pending investigation. Without liability insurance, the company couldn't operate. Thursday, when the Fed showed up with subpoenas, James Rodriguez called an emergency board meeting. But here's the beautiful part. Tony had documented everything himself. Remember his obsession with tracking performance metrics? Every cost reduction, every specification change, every optimization was logged in the CRM system with his digital signature. The man had created a perfect paper trail of his own fraud. By Friday, Tony was suspended without pay pending investigation. His company car got repossessed, his office got sealed, and security escorted him out the building with a cardboard box of personal items. Jerry told me Tony tried claiming he was just following company policy to maximize profits. Problem was, there was no company policy authorizing safety violations or specification fraud. Tony had freelanced the whole operation. The next week brought a parade of investigators. OSHA showed up to inspect every installation Tony had overseen. The State Industrial Safety Board launched a formal investigation. Our insurance company hired their own forensic accountants to calculate potential claims exposure. But the knockout punch came from Riverside Fabrication. Remember that $850,000 production line they hadn't installed yet? Their engineering team had discovered the equipment discrepancies during pre-installation testing. When they learned about the broader investigation, they filed a lawsuit for breach of contract and fraudulent misrepresentation. That lawsuit opened the floodgates. Precision Manufacturing filed next, claiming the equipment failures had cost them $200,000 in lost production and overtime repairs. Automotive Parts Inc. demanded immediate equipment replacement after discovering their new conveyors were rated 25% below their operational requirements. Within 2 weeks, the company faced $3.2 million in active lawsuits, federal investigation, suspended insurance coverage, and 14 customers demanding contract renegotiation. James Rodriguez called me personally on a Tuesday evening. "Bill, we need to talk. This situation has gotten out of hand." "James, I documented factual information during my transition. If that information has created problems, maybe you should ask Tony why he was cutting corners on safety specifications. Tony's no longer with the company. We terminated his employment yesterday." "Good. He was a liability. Bill, we'd like to offer you your position back. Full reinstatement, expanded territory, 15% salary increase. We need someone with your experience to help rebuild customer relationships." I let him sweat for about 10 seconds. "James, I'm 55 years old with 23 years of experience. I know equipment safety, I understand customer needs, and I've never compromised worker safety for profit margins. If you want my help cleaning up Tony's mess, we're going to do this my way." What does that mean? It means no more corner cutting, no more value engineering that reduces safety margins, no more MBA cost optimization that puts workers at risk. We sell equipment that meets or exceeds customer requirements. Period. Agreed. When can you start? I took the job back, but on my terms. Patricia and I had talked it over during those weeks at the lake, and we decided I'd work as senior sales consultant with guaranteed territory, input on all safety specifications, and a promise that customer relationships would take priority over quarterly profit optimization. The cleanup took 6 months. I spent most of that time visiting customers, explaining what had happened, and working with their engineering teams to verify equipment adequacy. Some installations needed immediate upgrades. Others required modified operating procedures to stay within safe parameters. A few customers, like Riverside Fabrication, decided to start fresh with completely new equipment specifications. The company covered every upgrade, every modification, every replacement. The total cost ran close to $2.8 million, but it was either that or face bankruptcy from lawsuits and federal sanctions. Tony Sullivan tried fighting his termination through lawyers, claiming he was being scapegoated for company-wide cost-cutting policies. Problem was, his own CRM documentation proved he'd acted independently. Every specification change, every safety margin reduction, every value engineering decision was logged under his personal authorization. His wrongful termination lawsuit lasted about 3 months before his attorneys quietly dropped it. Hard to claim unfair dismissal when federal investigators are building a fraud case with your own digital signatures as evidence. The federal investigation took longer. Defense Contract Audit Agency investigators spent 4 months reviewing every piece of equipment delivered to companies holding defense contracts. They found systematic underrating in 12 different installations, affecting 6 defense contractors across Ohio and Pennsylvania. Tony faced federal charges for fraud related to defense contracts. The prosecutors offered him a plea deal, 18 months minimum security prison, 3 years probation, and permanent disbarment from working with any company holding federal contracts. He took the deal rather than risk a trial that could have meant 5-10 years. But the most satisfying moment came 8 months after I'd returned to work. I was visiting Precision Manufacturing to check on their upgraded assembly line when Michael met me at the front gate. "Dad, I need to thank you for something. I don't know exactly what you did, but that equipment problem we were having, management told us you identified safety issues that could have led to serious injuries. They said you probably saved lives." I kept my expression neutral. "Just doing my job, son. Equipment safety isn't negotiable. The guys on the floor wanted me to tell you thanks. We know you didn't have to speak up, especially after you'd already left the company. That meant more than any commission check or performance bonus ever could." The industry took notice too. About a year later, I got invited to speak at the Industrial Equipment Safety Conference in Detroit. The topic was maintaining safety standards in cost optimization environments. Fancy way of saying how to stop MBA types from getting workers killed. During my presentation, I talked about the responsibility that comes with experience. When you've been in this business long enough to understand the real-world consequences of cutting corners, you have an obligation to speak up, not just for profits or customer relationships, but for the safety of workers who depend on equipment functioning properly under demanding conditions. The audience, mostly grizzled industry veterans like myself, gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, several people mentioned similar experiences with corporate cost-cutting that compromised safety. Turns out Tony's approach wasn't unique. It was becoming common across the industry. That presentation led to consulting opportunities with other companies facing similar issues. I started doing safety audits for industrial equipment installations, reviewing specifications for adequacy, training sales teams on the difference between cost optimization and corner cutting. Patricia says I seem more relaxed now, more like the guy she married 28 years ago. I'm working less but earning more, focusing on customers who value experience over digital fluency, building relationships instead of chasing quarterly numbers. My territory now includes 8 major accounts worth $4.1 million annually. I work 4 days a week, spend Fridays consulting on safety audits, and take 3-day weekends at the lake whenever Patricia's doctor appointments require it. Her diabetes is well controlled now that we have excellent insurance coverage, and we're finally building the retirement fund that got derailed during the 2008 recession. Tony Sullivan? Last I heard, he landed at some tech startup in Austin, selling software solutions to manufacturing companies. According to his LinkedIn profile, he's a digital transformation evangelist helping companies leverage AI-driven optimization protocols. Good luck with that. The irony is perfect. He's now selling theoretical solutions to theoretical problems, while real people like me handle actual equipment that real workers depend on every day. Sometimes young sales reps ask me for advice about dealing with pressure to cut corners or compromise specifications. I tell them the same thing every time. Your reputation is built over decades, but can be destroyed in minutes. The customers who trust your judgment today will remember how you handled difficult situations long after your current manager is gone. Know your products, understand your customers' real needs, and never compromise worker safety for profit margins. Everything else, the CRM systems, the digital optimization, the corporate buzzwords, is just noise. The best revenge isn't just proving you were right. It's being around long enough to watch the people who doubted you eventually ask for your help, and when they do, you help them. Because that's what professionals do. I sleep well these days. Patricia says I don't grind my teeth anymore, and my blood pressure is back to normal. When former colleagues ask how I knew Tony's system would collapse, I tell them it wasn't genius, it was just experience. In this business, shortcuts always catch up with you eventually. Tony thought he could outsmart 23 years of industry knowledge with 6 months of MBA theory. He learned the hard way that when you're dealing with equipment that could kill someone if it fails, there are no acceptable shortcuts. Some lessons can only be taught by reality. Tony got his education, I got my vindication, the workers got safer equipment, and the industry got a reminder that experience still matters, even in the age of digital transformation. That's not revenge. That's just justice with a very satisfying timeline.